In the course of a normal mapping project, we typically carry around a clipboard and some pencils, some drawing tools, and put as much as possible on the map while we're in the field, including our observations and some interpretations, because it's easier to make interpretations when you're in the landscape, and you'll typically make better interpretations. For our virtual mapping this year, we have to do some substitutions because we have to work in a drafting program, and we're going to work in PowerPoint because it's available to everybody in the class, and it provides some basic drawing tools. I'm going to give you some hints and tips as to how to use PowerPoint for this purpose. And we're going to provide you with a template that's going to look something like this. It's a base map of the geoscience garden, very similar to the one that you would carry if you were doing it in the field. There's a scale bar and a north arrow marked, and there's also a grid of lines, which is useful sometimes in plotting things. We've also provided down at the bottom left-hand corner a legend, a bunch of different colored markers to show the different kinds of rock units, and a bunch of different orientation symbols to mark the orientations of structures. So you can use all of those things, and we should be able to drag them into the map and place them at places where you make observations. In order to do this, it's helpful to zoom in somewhat to the map. So I'm going to zoom in to 200%. And my zoom tools are down here. I can drag a slider, or I can click on the little X until it becomes large enough. If I select something in the diagram, then the zooming will center on the thing I have selected, which is quite handy often. So we're going to imagine that we have measured the orientation of bedding at some outcrop in the geoscience garden. So I'm going to get hold of a bedding symbol, and I'm going to drag it into the map. And while I do that, I'll hold down the Option key, and that has two functions. The first thing is that it will create a copy of the symbol, because you want to leave the original symbol in the legend. And the second thing is it makes the dragging smoother, because there is a slightly annoying tendency for objects to snap onto other objects as you move them. So I recommend holding down the Option key and then getting hold of the object that you want to place. And you'll see that the object that you're trying to place has a little plus sign associated with it. And when you have it in the right place, and you can drag it off the map, and the map will scroll. It's a little bit jerky, but the project in the geoscience garden starts here at outcrop 13, so you may want to let the symbol go somewhere near outcrop 13. Just make sure that that plus sign is showing. That tells you you're making a copy of the original symbol, and you're leaving the other one back in the legend where it came from. Let's just check it's still there. So there's our symbol. So the next thing we can do is we want to turn it around. And this is actually easier in PowerPoint than it is when you're working in the field on a clipboard outdoors, because our symbol has a little handle at the top corner. And if we get hold of that, we can rotate it. And if your PowerPoint is working as mine is, it shows the angle that you've rotated it. So if, for example, we know that the strike at this outcrop is 153 degrees, we can get pretty close to 153 degrees there by dragging it. There are other ways to do this. So I will undo, put it back to its north-south orientation. So an alternative way is to go into your tools in your ribbon, and somewhere in here there's an arrange palette. There it is. Your ribbon may look a bit different if you have a bigger screen than mine. I've shrunk down my window so that it's quite small. If you're lucky enough to have a large monitor, you may see more things separately on the ribbon. If we go down here and we go to rotate on the arrange menu, and we go down to more rotation options, it brings up a sidebar and in that you can see rotation. So you have the option here to click in the little arrows to increase 1 degree at a time. Obviously, you don't want to do that 153 times, so you can write in 153 here, and if I hit Tab to move to the next field, it's rotated my my symbol by 153 degrees, so it's in the correct orientation there. Usually when we're plotting, we put our symbols just off to the side of our outcrops rather than putting them right on top of our outcrops, because we want to put a symbol for the rock unit right on top of the rock outcrop. Now, the other thing that we need to do is we need to put a number beside the symbol, and there are a couple of different ways you can do this. You can go and get a text box here, and you can put in a number. For some reason that didn't seem to take. Here we go. You can put in a number. So let's say that this is dipping at 17 degrees. You can put in a number for the dip. Now that's a little large, and for each PowerPoint file it tends to default to a particular number. For some reason it's defaulting to 20.1 points here. I recommend maybe using 8 point for your numbers. If you don't want to do that, let's take that away. You can go back down to the legend and grab one of the numbers in the legend. Here it is. Now they're a little bit difficult to get hold of. If you click inside the writing, it thinks you want to edit the writing. So you have to click on the very edge of the box, and you can drag that into the map. Of course, we want to leave the one behind that's in the legend. Let's go over to where our strike and dip symbol is. There it is. So here's our 7 degrees this time. So we want to leave the original one in the legend, so I'm going to hold down the Option key when I let go of it, and that makes sure that the one in the legend stays there. And then, of course, I've got to edit this in order to make it 17 degrees. So that's how you can put symbols onto the map, and we've provided a bunch of ready-made symbols for you. If you want to make other symbols, you can make them down in the legend area. I would suggest that you group them together in order to make manageable symbols. And you can find the group option to make a grouped object somewhere in one of these menus. I think it's in the drawing menu, in Arrange. So you can group things together here. If you have a bunch of things selected, this becomes active, and you can group a bunch of objects into one object. So typically we color in our outcrops on a geologic map, and we've provided some color dots here. So let's say we want to use this orange color for our first outcrop. We use bold colors or heavy shading if we're using pencils for where we've actually observed, where we have a good confidence of what's there. And we use faint transparent colors when we have less confidence. So I'm going to drag one of these into the map, and it really helps to be zoomed in to at least 200% here, because if you're zoomed out, it's very difficult to get hold of these objects. You tend to get hold of the corners, and if you drag the corner, I'll show you what happens. The object gets huge. Okay, so you don't want to do that, so we'll undo that. So you need to select the object, and then you need to get in the middle of it, and that's hard to do unless you're zoomed in for these little objects. So I'm going to drag one of these over to my outcrop. And I'm going to drop it on my outcrop. There. I can do things to this. If I zoom in some more, I can actually change the shape of this. Let's say this is an outcrop that's much larger than a meter across, so we want to change its size. Well, I can get hold of a corner and drag it. If I hold down the Control key while I'm dragging it, it will keep the middle of the object in the same place instead of keeping the corner of the object in the same place, which is sometimes quite handy. So I can make it bigger. And I can also click on the object with the right mouse button. Or if you're on a Mac which doesn't have a right mouse button, you can do Control click on a Mac, and I think it will do the same thing. And down here you can do Edit Points. So if I do Edit Points, I get little control points on this circle, and I can change it to whatever shape I want. So I can edit shapes not expected to do that for these outcrops because we didn't make detailed information in the field. You don't have a good enough view. If you were really in the field, you could tailor each of these color patches to the real size and shape of the outcrop to a rough estimate. Not required to do this, but if you want to show some of the larger outcrops in something close to their real size, feel free to do so. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. There are other things you may want to do. You may decide that there's that you don't want to use blue for this outcrop. You want to use some other color. So here's a neat trick. Let's say we want to make that outcrop orange. I can select this orange color patch down in the legend, and then I have a little thing that looks like a paintbrush, and this is the Format Painter in PowerPoint. And if I get hold of that now, I can paint other objects with the same attributes, the same colors as the thing that's selected. So if I click on this one, it magically changes to orange, the same color as the thing I had selected. I see I did something wrong here. I wasn't holding down my Option key when I dragged the blue dot into the picture. So let's just undo. I'm going to go all the way back here through all my edits, and I'm going to put the blue dot back, and I'm going to do that again. I'm going to zoom into about 200%, and I'm going to make sure I'm holding down the Option key this time. There we go. And maybe we'll resize this one again. Now there are other ways to change the color of things. If I have that object selected and I go up into drawing, I can also choose the shape fill here, so I can color it with any color I like. And I could give it an outline if I want to. I suggest you probably don't give it an outline because it will make your map too confusing. So also, while we're in the field, we may want to put in some geological boundaries. This is a flat area, so you can use your strike and dip symbols as a guide to the orientation of the geological boundaries. So let's go and get a line here. So we have a galaxy of shapes here. I tend to use mostly this one here, the freeform, and this one here, the curve. Let's use the freeform for the moment, and we'll put in a geologic boundary. Let's imagine that we think there's a geologic boundary that goes along here. You can just go click, 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 and you can put in the geologic boundary. There it is. Now maybe I don't want it to be that thick. I don't want it to be blue. I can change the attributes by going into drawing. And what I want to do is to change the shape outline. So let's maybe change it to black. And it looks a bit thick and clunky on my map. So let's change the weight. Now you have to do a bit of trial and error here. I'm not sure what weight I'm looking at, but I often find that 1 point or 3/4 of a point makes a nice, fine, neat line, similar to what you would do with a nice sharp pencil if you were working in the field. And then if we're uncertain about our boundary, we haven't observed it, but it's an interpretation, we might want to make it a dashed line. So you can draw all kinds of lines. Now, I've made a few mistakes going along the way, and one thing that I would recommend is that you save often. Saving and making backups is an important part of working with any computer software if you're working professionally. So saving your work regularly is important. And I would suggest when you save, and this will be different depending on whether you're on a Mac or on a Windows machine, I would suggest doing save as at regular intervals. And when you name your file, please name it with your name. I'll type Waldron in here. And then give it a number, 0, 1. And each time you save, increase that number. Use save as and increase that number. And then you'll have a paper trail of everything you did. And if you seriously mess up your project and accidentally save it, you can go back to the one that you've made. To be doubly sure, I'll recommend that while you're working on this project, you upload working versions to eClass. And we will make it possible for you to hand in multiple versions as you go. They will all be stored in eClass. When we come to mark this assignment, we'll mark only the most recent one. But if you upload them, you'll have all of the stages on the way that will be saved in eClass. And that will help to protect you against unforeseen computer problems. Supposing your computer completely crashes, becomes inoperable, you will have something saved in the cloud. I will also say that at any stage during this final assignment, although we've said we'd give help with the geology on some parts of the assignment, but not on others, for technical issues, how do I do this in PowerPoint? How do I do this in eClass? How can I do this in Zoom? Please feel free to contact any of the instructional staff, that's me or any of the 3 TAs, at any stage during the assignment. And do that sooner rather than later. It will not be very easy if everybody tries to set up a Zoom meeting with us 5 minutes before the deadline for passing it in. So I would recommend that you start working on this project as soon as it becomes available. I'll show you one more thing in PowerPoint, because when we have put some lines on the map, we may want to color in the map with our interpretation. That's part of the production of any geologic map. And in order to do that, we want to color in some areas. So in order to do that, we're going to go into Insert Shapes, and we're going to use the freeform. But instead of just drawing a line, this time we're going to draw a shape that comes back to the start, and we're going to color in an area. And this is a very different feel from coloring in with color pencils, which is what you would do in the field, but it will come to the same kind of thing. So when you come back to the start of your line, close to the start of the line, you see the area automatically colors it in with the color that PowerPoint wants it to have, and it colors it in blue, and it covers everything else up, which is a troubling thing. So here's what you need to do to fix that. Several things you need to do. First thing is, let's go into Arrange, and we're going to send our polygon to the back. So there it goes. Now it's behind the other things. Now you notice it doesn't go behind the base map, because we have the base map in a locked template layer, so that you can't move it around. We think that's helpful, so you can't accidentally move the base map around. You can only get at the stuff that's on the top of it. So this polygon has not dropped behind the base map. It's only dropped behind our strike and dip measurement. So we still need to fix some things. While we're here looking at it, let's turn off the outline, because we don't want a black line around the outside of our interpretation. So we're just going to go into Shape Outline here and turn it to No Outline. So that's beginning to look better. So now the next thing is that we want to make it transparent so that we can still see the base map. So there's a couple of ways that we can go about doing that. The first is that you'll see here in the sidebar we have a slider for transparency. Just to show you a way around the sidebar, it has different parts, and this is the part that we used for doing the rotation. Obviously we're not interested in that now. This is the part that deals with colors and transparency and things like that, features of the appearance. So I'm just going to dial the transparency up to about 70%. And there we have a nice faint color area all across the map. So that's one way we could do that. Now let's take that away. I'm going to show you another way we could do that, because we've provided way down here in the legend, we've provided some transparent rectangles with these same colors. So we could use the format painter to paint that transparent color onto our block. Let's see if that works. There we go. We clicked on the blue thing, and now it's become transparent. So that's another way that you can color up your map to make a nice interpretation. Finally, we have the capability to change the background. So if you go into slides up here, actually to make your final map, we have another layout. I'm just going to try this. We have a blank base map, and to make your final map look really good, you can change the layout to the blank base map. And what that does is it turns off all of the trees and the outcrop numbers and just puts your geological observations and interpretations on the map, which is what you would see on a final map of a mapping area. So that's a tour around some of the features in PowerPoint which we would like you to use to make a geological map. There are good things and bad things about this. Some of the things are a little less intuitive, like coloring in, than doing that on a paper map. On the other hand, actually putting in the strike and dip symbols in the correct orientation is actually easier in PowerPoint than it is on paper. So hopefully you will find your way through this template, and feel free to ask us questions if you need to at any stage in the project, but sooner is better than later. So thank you for listening, and hopefully that will be useful in making your maps.